Hi, everyone. So I'm going to jump in. We're going to start with a little bit of a recap and kind of go from there. So we're working towards our persuasive speech. We have done our informative speech. So I'm really hoping that if you're unclear on any of this moving forward, go through the lecture notes that can be found under the lecture note tab at the top of Canvas. Okay, so try to go through those if you're lost on any of this. I think I do a good job of kind of going back and addressing some of those things, but I really just want to get going. Again, we're all in this together, so try to use this as an escape from whatever the chaos is going on outside. I'm going to recap a little bit, and I'm going to try and do a screen share here with a PowerPoint so it's easier to follow along. The best thing about this is it's a video. You can pause it, you can rewind it, you can watch it over if something's not clear. Again, if you're losing track of what's going on, you're getting distracted by other things, pause the video, take a break, get up, stretch. I don't know how long this video is going to be, but reward yourself for getting things done, because it's really hard to stay focused with everything going on. So I'm going to jump into this. Let me try and share my screen here. Let's see. All right. So y'all should see my PowerPoint presentation here, and I'm just going to start at the beginning. Okay, so sorry, I have this set up on like 2 screens, so I'm a little distracted, but I'm calling this week 1. It's just a week 1 of our online course, so don't get confused. This is new content. So let's go into, so we're working towards our persuasive speech. So let's recap a little bit. We did our informative speech kind of right before spring break. Think back, I know it's been a while. Informative. The purpose of the informative speech is really to teach a topic or an old topic perhaps with a new take. So you really want a lesson to be learned at the end of your speech. So how is that different from a persuasive speech? Here's the definition of persuasion. It's the process by which a speaker influences what audience members think or do. So you're going to change somebody's mind perhaps, right? You're going to speak to your audience and hopefully have some change as the outcome potentially. So there's different ways that this can be accomplished. So I'm going to go a little bit into theory. Again, pause if you're getting lost, rewatch it if it doesn't make sense, but we're just going to go through this a little slow together, okay? So persuasive speech really relies on logos. So I'm sure you guys have heard of ethos, logos, pathos. It's kind of the way you appeal to people. So in this case, we're talking about logos, which is, what proof, or I like to think of it as like logic. What proof does a speaker offer to an audience through the words of his or her message? So what evidence, what support are you giving to your claims? So that's very important to some philosophers, that logos is kind of influential in persuasive speaking, is that some people will, like that logic will get their brain going, hold on, let me pause for a second. So it's kind of like, I'm talking about, I want to persuade somebody to adopt a pet. So there's evidence, maybe it's evidence from a psychologist who's done research on the effects of owning a dog. That's the logos, or proof of, hey, there's positivity that comes out of adopting a dog. And that's my claim. And so I'm going to back it up with some logic and some research or some science or something like that. There's also, researchers look at what's called the elaboration likelihood model. So again, this is a little bit of theory, just bear with me. It's a model of persuasion designed to explain why audience members use an elaborated thinking process in some situations and not in others. So think about it this way. Say you're deciding where to go out to dinner. you really probably are deciding on what sounds good, right? Or you might take into consideration cost, or the distance, but it's probably just what sounds good, right? That's what you're going to have for dinner. But if you're thinking about spending a lot of money on something, there might be a long thought process that goes into that. So this is kind of a model that shows there's two different routes that people can take when they're thinking about, should I do something? Should I not do something? There's a central route. That's kind of a straightforward, very kind of logical thinking. They're thinking critically. And then there's a peripheral route, which is, it probably applies more to what you're going to eat for dinner. It's not very analytical. I mean, it doesn't, you don't have to have hard facts. It's more so like, yeah, that kind of sounds good. There's not a lot of effort put into deciding the decision. So there's two routes. So this is kind of a better example here. Thinking about buying a car, your central path to buying a car, which is highly analytical. You're looking at cost, insurance rates, safety ratings, reliability. Like, is the car going to break down over time? Fuel efficiency. I mean, those are very analytical, and it takes a lot of research, and it's very meticulous in pinpointing the key facts of why you should do something. The peripheral path is, the color. It's more expensive, big wheels, the aesthetics of it, like, I'll be cool, it's a better car. It's kind of all those like secondhand thoughts that, somebody who's worried about spending money might think. So people process information differently. So when you're trying to persuade somebody, you kind of have to figure out what route you should go, right? What's going to appeal to someone better. If it's a topic they're highly invested in and they're, deciding spending thousands of dollars, you might need to go the central route and lay out the facts. If it's, something that they're kind of like, oh, maybe I'll think about it, not so sure, they're not motivated to, look at the hard facts, you might have to go a peripheral route and kind of pull on their emotions a little bit more than maybe the logic. So, this is another theory. It's called transportation theory. It's a theory that the experience of becoming immersed in a story can transport an audience into a narrative world, which can lead to real world belief and or behavior change. So summing that all up, so going back to our two paths, we have our very highly analytical, our central path where I need the facts, I need to research everything. Then you have that peripheral path, which is kind of like, oh, maybe we need to look at kind of the other aesthetics of things and, how does that car look versus how is it safety rated, So transportation theory kind of plays in there where it might work on somebody who's on the peripheral route, that it may help appeal to, maybe you tell them a story, you engage their emotions, and I want to have people adopt dogs, so I'm going to tell you this life-changing story of how my dog that I've had for 8 years and adopted has changed my life. And I'm going to tell you how influential it has been. That decision really changed my life and how I treat other people and all of this stuff. And that might spark something in somebody else to have a change in them. So you could tell a very powerful story to get that change to happen. So when looking at these theories, we're realizing that people process information in different ways. That some people are invested in one topic. Like, I love my dogs. They're sitting behind me chewing on bones right now. But some people might not be. And so you have to find a balance when you're giving a speech on such a topic. Okay, moving on. Persuasive purpose. So persuasive purpose is the idea of, why are you giving a persuasive speech? So really, we talked about persuading somebody, but you could persuade people for different reasons. So in this case, one example is branding. It's the process of creating a lasting impression about a name, company, or product. Think commercials, Really, right? That's their whole goal is, I mean, think about the Super Bowl. How many of you remember Super Bowl ads? Those are the most memorable ads all year, right? So, I mean, their whole purpose is to teach you about a product and persuade you to go buy it, right? They're spending millions of dollars to do that. So that is an example of persuasive speaking, and that's a purpose behind that persuasive speaking. So branding is one example. There's also adoption. So it's a consumer's decision to commit to a product, practice, or idea. So, I mean, you've probably seen, again, a commercial example. There's PSAs, public service announcements, that are going on probably all over right now. I know on ABC 15, there's quite a few that we're running about, it's just little ads or commercials about, you know, make sure you're social distancing, you know, this is why we're staying 6 feet apart. Here's the reasons why. And that's persuasive speaking. It's the idea you're trying to get somebody to adopt a change or adopt to a practice or an idea. I mean, before this whole coronavirus thing, it was, there were PSAs about, you know, just pass it on, be kind to one another. That pass it on was a whole campaign of ads where it was just, you saw one person do a kind act, so then that person did a kind act, and then another person did a kind act. So adopting ideas or practices. It could be a product, but it's not necessarily branding. So, but it's kind of a practice or an idea. So think public service announcement and things like that for adoption. Reinforcement. You might be persuading somebody by reinforcing attitudes, beliefs, values, behaviors. I'm trying to think of an example. This could be, you know, here, make this change and I'll reward you with a trip to the zoo, or I'll reward you with a trip to Disneyland when they're open. You know, stay inside and you will stay safe. You know, it's that reinforcement persuasive speaking. It's, here's what I want you to do, and here are the positive things that you can get out of doing that. That's reinforcement. And then there's inoculation. It's techniques used to make people's belief systems resistant to counter persuasion. So this one's very unique. I would think of this personally as, you know, I think of the word cult that comes to mind. You know, it's how you're so ingrained or so wrapped up in your own beliefs that you're going to just keep reinforcing those ideas, and somebody's going to persuade me that yes, my ideas are right, and I'm not going to let anybody else tell me otherwise. So that's kind of inoculation, is that, you know, I'm getting spoken to and that we're reinforcing my behavior, you know, my beliefs, and no one else is going to be able to persuade me otherwise. And lastly, there's change. Your goal of persuasive speaking, maybe you want to change somebody's attitude or belief or behavior. Again, this kind of, they're very similar to like adoption, where, you know, this one is more so like, you have an existing belief, let's change it a little bit. So, you know, you love dogs, that's great, but here's why you should adopt instead of shop. You know, I want to change or modify, because you already love dogs, that's great, let's live on that. I'm going to persuade you now to modify that or substitute it a little bit to adopt a dog versus going out and buying one from a puppy mill. So there's lots of reasons why you would give a persuasive speech. I mean, I'm sure you do it every day. I know some of you have kids. I'm sure you have to get very creative right now on how you persuade people, persuade them to do things. So think about how these tactics could play into that. I mean, I have to persuade my dogs not to bark while I'm doing these videos. So I give them a bone. So I'm reinforcing a behavior to be quiet. So it's just those little things, persuasion all the time. So kind of the last to sum up this section. So I'm going to do this kind of in two parts. Audience perceptions. That's really going to influence how effective your persuasive speaking is. You know, the way the audience sees you or gives credibility to you can really determine if they are going to believe you, make that change, adopt that thing, that you want them to adopt. So think about that. So one of the first things is ethos. It's the degree to which an audience perceives a speaker as credible. So when you're telling people to make a change or persuade them to be in your favor, are they going to see that you're the real deal, that you're believable, that why should they do this? I mean, maybe you're just spouting a whole bunch of random nonsense and they just don't know. But you really want to have that credibility, the ethos, to draw them in, to get you to persuade them. So again, source credibility, it's the audience's perception that the speaker is believable. I mean, again, are you spouting up a whole bunch of stuff, or did you do your research? Are you informing them to persuade them? Because that's key, remember, to inform them, to persuade them. Competence, the audience's perception that the speaker is knowledgeable about the topic. So these are kind of all things that go hand in hand in making sure that you're presenting a good picture and you've done your research and you're trying to really persuade people the way that you should. And lastly, character. The audience's perception that the speaker's trustworthiness transfers to the claims that the speaker is making. So another way of putting this is me, for example. Am I all over the place with this lecture? Probably just a little bit, but bear with me. You know, I have a slideshow. I've put some energy into this. So hopefully this helps with my trustworthiness, that I've done my research. I know what I'm talking about, that I'm a good teacher because I've showed that I've put my research into this and that I'm trying to teach you the correct things. So it's just character. How do you see someone? So again, these are all things that you have to think about, is how am I going to present my best self to my audience? How am I going to present, you know, the best idea to my audience to get them to change? All right, this is the fun part. Pause the video, go stretch your legs, come back, take like 2-3 minutes, and then we're going to go into how to organize your message. All right, so hopefully you took a break. Hopefully you got up and stretched. Hopefully you moved around a little bit. So we're going to go into kind of some of the ways. This is really going to recap stuff that we went over right before our informative speeches on how to organize messages. So there's about 4 slides here we're going to go through really quick and get you started on the guidelines for your persuasive speech in the next video. So organizing your message. We talked about these. These are back in chapter 9 of your textbook, should you have one and would like to kind of go over them. You can also Google them. There's a lot of good examples online. So these are ways that are effective in showcasing your ideas to your audience. So one of the good examples that has been talked about, that we talked about before, is Monroe's motivated sequence. There's 5 key parts in Monroe's motivated sequence, and it kind of walks you through how to effectively persuade someone. So I'm going to pop this up here. So this is kind of an example of the motivated sequence. You have your hook. How am I going to draw attention to this thing that needs attention? You know, draw people in. This could be an emotional story. This could be a way to just really grab attention again. And then the need. What's the problem? What's causing it? You know, talk to me about these things. Like, what's the need? What do people, why is this an issue? Okay. Then you have satisfaction and visualization. So these are where you throw in your facts. This is what I think a good solution would be based on these facts. Visualization is, this is how this would be effective, how we can get to that solution. And then action is you recap and you tell people this is what you need to do walking away to get to that solution. So that is Monroe's motivated sequence. Next, we have the problem solution model. So the problem solution model is very similar to Monroe's motivated sequence. And I have a feeling a lot of you might go with this model because I think it's very effective. You start out again with your attention getter, your introduction, pull people in. Again, emotional stories will go a very, very long way, I think, in persuasive speaking. And then you tell people what the problem is. Again, if I want people to adopt animals, not shop for them, the problem is, there's a problem with shelters euthanizing animals every day, and there's also a problem with puppy mills taking advantage of people, making people pay hundreds of dollars every single day. And it affects, these dogs that they're not born healthy and everything. So there's so many problems. Here it is. Let me lay that out for you. Now, the cause of this is that people want designer dogs. They want puppies. They want, these cute little, that's the problem. The cause, I'm sorry. And then what is the solution? How are we going to fix this problem? Let me lay it out for you. And then there's a conclusion. Recap everything and really tell people what you want to walk away doing. I want you to walk away today thinking that if the time comes, you will adopt, not shop. Put that call to action in there. And then one of the other examples that could be very effective is the causal pattern. So the causal pattern is kind of arguing that one thing causes another. And again, the way this would be outlined is very similar to these other two models, but I don't have a picture representation of it. So you would kind of have to work with how it would work for you. An example is, fast food is the reason for rising obesity rates in the United States. So I'm gonna have people adopt this idea potentially. I think that's kind of, I want people to adopt this idea that they believe me and that maybe they'll stop eating fast food as often. Maybe that's my goal, to have people stop eating fast food as often as they do. So, I will start with my hook about, maybe the rising obesity rates and how fast food has kind of, maybe the growth of fast food restaurants along the same line as obesity has grown, and lay that out as the problem. So then I have a cause and effect. So that's a third example. So those are the three examples of really persuasive speaking that I think we need to keep in mind when we're doing this speech. So what are your next steps? Your next steps after watching this video, go take a break. It's a little hefty video, so please go take a break and come back to it. You have some time, and there will be a video on Canvas of the guidelines for your persuasive speech. And it's going to be, what are the time requirements, what your video should look like, how to set up your video as best as possible. I might show a little tutorial of how to upload your videos to YouTube and post those on the discussion board, because I want to make sure everybody is on the same page with all of that. And then once you watch that persuasive speech video guidelines, I want you to go to the discussion board for this week, and there is a thread. So you'll see I've already posted a comment that says respond here with your topic ideas. You're just going to comment, reply back to that comment with your 3 ideas on the discussion board. And there is a deadline on the list of to-do things of when that needs to be done by. But again, the first step after this is to go watch your persuasive speech and this persuasive speech guideline video. And then there will be some more videos and things to do for the rest of this week. All right, thank you so much, y'all, for sticking in there, and please email me with any questions from here on out.